Hi there, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Canton.
I'm Dave Higgins.
I'm Ed Sullivan.
And this week we're going to be talking about dealing with disappointment. But before we do that, we'll do our usual weekly roundup. And Dave, you're furthest to the left, so you can go first.
Right. Another episode of Seven Stones. Written, published, polished, not necessarily in that order. And coming up towards the end now. So I'm not sure exactly how many episodes there are left, but it's about to get to the point where we find out if I'm evil or not.
Everyone dies.
Whether the characters can actually win. And so what else? Going through the feedback for Sorcery, the third book in Dragons and Magic. And that's it for me this week. It's been a bit of a relaxed week because I've been easing out of the release of Origin and Adventure, and I haven't really dived into my next project yet. I'm taking a couple of days to ease off.
Cool. Ed, do you want to go next?
Severely behind on NaNoWriMo. Have about 7,000 words. I think I'm supposed to have easily probably 3 times that by this point. But I'm still continuing. I just intend to have some kind of a catch-up day, which has not happened yet. And even if I fail, and you're talking about coming to the end of the month, if I fail and I got a third of what I'm supposed to, it's still beginnings of a good novel length work. Oh gosh, what else? I read Origin from you guys. I enjoyed it. Picked up the second book on Kindle Unlimited. Get to that eventually. Ended up being the secondary guest on a blog radio show called Off the Chain with an American author from Florida, Yvonne Mason. She was interviewing Dan Holyfield, who's the senior editor of Aphelion, where I started writing and editing, and I called in just to give him some support and got roped into being the guest for a third of the show, with also agreeing to be booked in the future for multiple episodes. Just kind of happened. Not much else. I mean, there was the standard mourning period after the election that some of us Americans had to go through. I'm coming to grips with our new president-elect, and hoping that he'll actually, for once in my life, hoping that he'll actually do what politicians want to do and go back on most of his campaign promises and do nothing for 4 years. Yes.
Did you see? He's already reversed on the wall.
Yes.
His main thing.
Reversed on the wall, reversed on Obamacare, and reversed on abortion stances. So far we're doing pretty good.
As they pointed out in the Republican primary, he was a Democrat until he decided to run for president.
And all of his kids are still Democrats. So he wanted to be the president. He's going to be the president. And he's going to upset lots of people. But he's not going to necessarily upset the people that they thought he was going to upset. He's going to upset some of the people that voted for him as well. And generally, actually, that is how I like my politics. If not everybody can be happy, then I like everybody to be upset. I don't like any one side to be at an advantage. If everybody can't be happy and we can't sing Kumbaya, I would just like complete nihilistic chaos, anarchy. It's perfectly fine with me that way.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll avoid getting into politics, I think. So for me this week, no, it's okay. I would. The problem is that if I start talking about politics, then it'll go an hour of me just talking about politics. So it's probably best just to stay out of it. And as well, Jonathan Pye had a great video this week where he was saying that it needs to be discussion between both sides rather than all of this shouting at each other. So, yeah, I don't know whether it's not really the forum for it. We could talk about it somewhere else, I guess.
No, that's fine.
So, me this week, Origin and Adventure came out, as we mentioned before, and are still doing phenomenally well, in my opinion. They I just checked earlier, and in the free charts in the UK were 459 for the whole store. So not even just a category, but like the whole store were 459 for free, which is very good. I'm very happy. And we got the feedback for Sorcery. So now we have to live up to the first two, because we've also gotten probably 4 or 5 emails from different people saying, this is amazing. You've changed the books into much better books after the beta reading. So my theory is that the reason most books succeed is generally word of mouth. You can skew things by advertising like crazy, which plenty of people have done, and you can get to the top of the charts just by hitting so many people that you get the percentage of people who will enjoy the book, even if it's not an amazing book. But things like The Girl with All the Gifts become big successes because someone says to their friends, you have to read this book, it's amazing. And then they read it and go, this is amazing, and tell all their friends, and it becomes a big hit. So, yeah, so the beta reading has been a success because it's not necessarily gotten us to the level of amazing world-changing book, but it's certainly gotten us closer. So Sorcery, Dave and I have been discussing what we need to do. So we had a meeting before this, for the podcast, and we have to fix what's wrong. And hopefully get another book that will be doing well in the charts. Other than that, Writer Tracker, I mentioned last week that people could try and log on. Ed pointed out to me this week that it was impossible to register. So that doesn't really help people to log on if it's impossible to register. I have hopefully fixed that, but I just fixed it like a few hours ago. Like I worked all day on it today. So hopefully it works, but if it doesn't, give me another week, I guess. But yeah, I put a bunch of stuff into that. I'm trying to get it to the stage where it's stable enough that I can leave it for a while, because I need to get back to writing. It's been 2.5 or 3 months of coding, which is what I do in my day job. The whole point of writing is to get away from my coding in my day job. So then spending the whole day coding is not the best not the best way to become a successful author. And the other thing, of course, is we discussed last week maybe focusing in on a genre or subgenre rather than trying to cover lots of different things. So I've come up with an idea I think I could use in Sword and Sorcery, so we can have more books in that subgenre.
Oh, God, yes. I look forward to that, actually.
So, so as I mentioned, that would mean then if someone starts on Bitter End, I can then push them to Dragons and Magic, which can then push them to whatever Project X that I write. I would say that, so it's something Garrett Robinson seems to have had great success doing. So Garrett, if you're not aware, if you haven't read his stuff, he wrote a zombie book and then a kind of a action James Bondy kind of thing, and a music thing, and fantasy, and yeah, so he wrote a bunch of different things, and then he's focused in on fantasy, just fantasy the whole way for the last 1.5 years or 2 years, whatever it's been, and has had much bigger success because of that. So yeah, it seems to be a way to go for a while at least. I mean, it's what publishers tend to do. They tend to have an author who just focuses. So anyway, yeah, it was vaguely related to what I did this week, but mostly just speculation. So this week's topic is dealing with disappointment. And the reason I suggested this was because if I go and do Sword and Sorcery for 2 years or whatever, that I'm going to disappoint some readers who follow me because of my science fiction stuff. Or especially the vampire novel I just released. If I don't write any more vampire stuff, then they're going to be disappointed with that. And personally, I'm someone who doesn't like disappointing people. I don't think there's many people who do if they're not sociopaths, but I tend to take it quite. I tend to get quite guilty, I guess, if I'm disappointing people. So I thought we could discuss that. And Ed said then that another way to look at it is dealing with the disappointment of your author career not going quite as well as you hoped it would. Is that fair to say, Ed?
Well, yeah, because when you said basically what you said just now, my thought was, well, I can switch genres as much as I want because I'm not disappointing anybody, which I would be disappointing someone, but not enough someones for them to pick my genre. Certainly, I have not had enough success with 16 Queen that I couldn't hop to a genre. I assume once I have something that gets sticky, then I'll have this dilemma. It's really the other way around. I could pop into whatever I wanted, and I wouldn't feel bad right now because I really haven't had anything significant for a solo novel project. I put the one out, and I certainly wouldn't call it sticky. Oh.
I think my perspective would be that that not getting readers is pointing to something being wrong. At least, so we have some readers. We certainly Origin and Adventure are doing fairly well at the moment. So we have some readers, but we're not like, best-selling Stephen King style authors. And I'm very skeptical about the whole thing of discoverability being the problem, because I think we're in an age where discoverability is almost as easy as it's ever been. Like every book is in print forever in digital form, and a reader can find a copy wherever they are in the world. So there's nothing stopping someone from reading your book. The thing that I think it is that something is putting readers off in some way. Now it could be the way that we're selling the books. So if the cover is ugly, or the title looks weird, or the description isn't good enough, or the price is too high, or the price is too low, maybe, or something is off in the way we're selling it. That certainly could be the case. So for instance, a lot of people speculate about talk about Facebook advertising and say, oh, the returns are getting lower. Well, is that not a sign that maybe you need to make your advertising more enticing, or get people like that? It should always be, the onus should always be on the person selling the product, I think, to get people to buy it, and it should be because the product is quality if possible. I mean, you don't want to be selling something that's crap. So as with anything, it's a balance. So there's a saying over here in Norway. They say that the Japanese work really hard, and they come up with a scientific theory or technology, and the Americans take that technology, throw together something really quick, and throw it out in the market and say it's the greatest possible thing in the world. The Germans take that technology, work in it for 10 years, make it meticulous and, really well engineered, and then bring it out and say it's, BMW or whatever. It's a quality, high tech quality product. And the Norwegians take something and work in it for 20 years and make it the best in the possible world, best possible thing in the whole world, and then don't tell anyone. Just hide it in their basement. So you have to advertise in a way, but you also have to have something that's worth buying as well. So yeah, I don't know. My that's just my personal take on when it's a very difficult thing to accept, but that when things aren't selling, maybe there's a reason they're not selling.
It becomes a strange loop, though, and this is very tied to disappointment. I don't want to spend my time writing the sequel to Sixth Queen because I don't want to start going down the road of a trilogy if my first book sucks. I don't know if my first book sucks because not enough people have voted on whether or not it sucks. So I start other projects, some of which I probably, if I put even a modicum of effort, I could probably release 3 new projects by spring. I'm gun shy in going deep into the Sixth Queen world because I don't know if it's worth it. Not enough people have told me. So I kind of get stuck in a disappointment loop.
There's a lot of evidence that 2 books are better than 1, that really with 1 book you're not achieving anything. You're not achieving the potential of the book. So potentially a sequel to Sixth Queen would be the least risky way to test things, because then you've got something for the people who liked Sixth Queen to move on to. And
so I guess I'll ask each of you, if the worst case scenario, and you may like it, if the general consensus was your first one in a series sucked, but you wrote it intending to make it a series, would you still give it the benefit of the doubt and do at least a second and see if that made it better for the first?
The second, well, I'd write the second book to be as good as I could. And because of the way these things work, the second book is potentially going to have more craft in it than the first book because you always get better. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not sure if the first one's good or not, if you write the second book so people can pick it up and don't need to have read the first one, then that gets you a sequel if people think the first one's kind of okay, and it gets you a standalone if the first one isn't really a grabber.
A great example of that is James Bond. So Casino Royale is not a very good book. I love the James Bond books, but Casino Royale is halfway through, he's already solved it and killed the bad guy, and then the second half of the book is just wandering around on a beach. It's a very rambly, not a very good book. I'm sure there's people who enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it very much. It's not a real James Bond book. But no one could say that James Bond isn't successful because the rest of the books he got better, and you don't have to read the others. You could read Goldfinger and you don't have to have read Casino Royale. That's fine. So you can even read the latest ones, like the later ones, and it's fine. There's nothing tying you. So there's definitely truth in what Dave is saying, that you do get better, So I was thinking as well, it's the way you look at it. So if you get too impatient, you're looking at it saying, well, why should I write the second one in the series if the first one's no good, because I'm not going to sell any? But you're investing in getting better. Like, the more words you write, the better you get. I forget who said it, but you have to write 1 million words of crap before you write anything good. So I think, so for instance, the Bitter End series, the first book, it kind of starts off in the wrong place and tells a bunch of different stories before it gets to the actual story and all this kind of stuff. Hard Vacuum, people have said I just got a review today, it's cartoonish and stupid. And the rest of the books in the series are not. They get more serious. Or not more serious, but more structured. But I don't regret writing any of them, because they're all, steps on the journey to getting to be a better author. And it's difficult to have things out there that are not up to the same standard you want to be at. But at the same time, without them, you wouldn't get to the standard. Like, you have to release something, and nothing's going to be perfect.
Well, I actually have not gotten a bad review on my book. It's just, I know, one, the pool of people feeding back is so small, and two, I know what the sales look like. So that's the problem. There's no traction. It's not that anybody has even given me a bad review. It's just that I know that I'm not making sales, and and then there's very concise, specific things like, hey, my mom hasn't read the book, picked it up and put it down. My wife, and I'm like, geez, if I can't get my own mother or my wife to read the book, how am I going to get Joe Average? But that's an emotional deficiency in Ed. That's not actually a marketing problem.
I don't know if having really close family wanting to read your stuff is always a good thing. Sometimes it is, but if you get a member of your family who loves it, and then they read it and they read all your stuff and they want to really support you, and then you're stuck in the situation of begging them not to put a review on Amazon, because if your only review on Amazon is from your mother, then that can potentially really damage your brand. And so if your mother wants to read it, they're going to get it on the day of release. They're going to read it. They're going to put the review up. So having a mother who wants to read it could be risky, because potentially they're going to be the only review that's sitting there for a while.
And won't the algorithm purge their review, though? The algorithm will wipe it.
Well, not if it doesn't know. I mean, if your mother's email address is davidulnarsluesmother@yahoo.co.uk, the algorithm is going to catch that straight away. But if it's pixiefish73 at Yahoo, then how are they going to know?
It's funny. That's a thing for another day. But I've tracked a few things that I think I know. The ISP, and if you've ever done anything from the same ISP in a certain amount of time, I think they can track it, because people have gotten purged on me from work because same ISP, and it's happened to family. I think that that's something to explore on another day. But I think that their algorithm is pretty, or it was. They apparently they softened it, but apparently it was pretty severe.
I think there's a big difference between one of your friends or family saying, "Oh, this is a good book," is nothing really compared to a complete stranger saying this is a good book, because they got no reason to tell you it's a good book.
Right.
So I definitely think, like, so here's the thing is that it's difficult because early on you don't have a lot of feedback. So it's very easy to get discouraged and think, well, no one likes it, or, you know, I'll never make it as an author, or whatever it happens to be. So it is important to get some positive feedback. And the trouble is friends and family will either not want to read it or not take it seriously because you wrote it and they know you and they don't consider you an author, or will say, oh my God, you managed to make a sentence without messing it up. Either way, it's not particularly useful as feedback. I was going to say my wife hates all my stuff, or I don't know if hate's the right word, but she certainly doesn't read any of my books. She likes vampire books, and she said, oh, you never write anything with vampires in it, so I'm not going to read any of your stuff. Wrote something with vampires in it. I gave her, and she said she only reads paperbacks, so I gave her a paperback copy 3 months ago. She's gotten to chapter 5 or something. So, you know, I don't think you need to worry about your wife or your mother not liking it.
Right.
I don't think it's all about style, and style is very individual. So it's complete fluke if someone in your family or friends likes your style.
Mm.
You could be Stephen King or Hemingway or whatever, and they'd just say, oh yeah, this is boring. Like, just because they don't like it.
Well, I mean, I have no intention of quitting, even if commercial success. I guess that's how I survived that disappointment. I have no intention of putting this aside. I would keep doing this regardless of the success because I like doing this.
Mm.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would absolutely love to have buckets full of money and be on talk shows, but it's not going to be the difference between, oh, I'm going to stop writing because I can't sell enough copies to quit my day job. I would have already boarded that train at this point if that was the case. It just can't be. And I think that may be the end all be all. I mean, I may be doing this until I retire, and I may never become a millionaire from it. And if that's the case, I have to be able to deal with that. And it's just a question of, do you enjoy doing what you do? And if you answer yes, then you keep writing. I mean,
it's about goals. I mean, it's about what you want to get out of it. As you say, if what you get out of it is the enjoyment of writing books, then just keep writing books. So my goal is to be one of the world's favorite authors. And that's a very, very lofty goal, but that's what I decided my goal was. So my whole thing is why I write every hour I get is because I'm not going to get there by sitting around thinking about being one of the world's greatest authors. And the whole reason I made Writer Tracker was because I did a cost-benefit analysis kind of thing where I said, if I make this system, it means I'm going to spend months programming instead of writing. However, if I make this system, it means I'll get essentially a fast forward button on getting better because I'll get feedback. So when I put up this stuff for beta reading, what Dave and I have found, and what I found in my solo stuff, is that the beginnings sucked. The beginnings ruined the rest of the book. If we hadn't had Writer Tracker, we wouldn't have figured that out for a while, probably. Or it would have cost another fast forward is using a professional editor. A professional editor would have caught that if they were a good editor. But that's, using that fast forward button, spending a lot of money to get that.
Right.
So I think it's about weighing up what you want to do and how you want to do it, and deciding where. I think if you're disappointed, you have to realize that there must be a reason for it. So I think everyone gets disappointed because they're not selling very much. But is it because you're not getting money out of the thing, or is it because you're not getting the the readers, or the whatever you'd call it, like the connection with the readers, the satisfaction of knowing that your readers really want to read. Like if you were giving away your books for free, and you were writing them and everyone was saying, this is the best ever, I love these books, I can't wait for the next, would that make you very happy? Or would you be going, oh, but I'm losing all this money? Or if you were selling one book, you were writing your books, you sell one book for $10,000. So every book you write, you just sell it and that's it. One person reads it. Would that make you happy? You're getting lots of money for it, but there's only one person reading it. I think there's probably a balance somewhere in between.
I think you just said something in the midst of all that answered part of your initial question about sticking to a genre or sticking to a track. You said that your ultimate goal was to be one of the most world's beloved authors. That would infer to me that not scattering your efforts would behoove you, because you have to pick a track to be as beloved as you insinuated. You have to be a beloved fantasy author, or a beloved horror writer. There's very few people who are beloved in 7 genres. So I would think that that answers part of your question for you. If you want to be beloved, you have to be a beloved this or a beloved that. You can't be in 3 different places. So.
Yeah, I mean, and the issue for me is that when I was just a reader, I would never considered science fiction and fantasy to be separate, completely separate things, whereas most readers do. So Piers Anthony writes science fiction and fantasy. I just read both sets. I don't care if it's science fiction or fantasy, but I think as well, it depends on your following and how good of an author you are. If you're writing amazing books, I think if Piers Anthony came out with a crime novel or something, there is a substantial amount of people who would read it anyway because they love his stuff. Or Scalzi is probably a better example. Piers Anthony is following has kind of waned a bit recently, but Scalzi has a big following. If he came out with something, people would want to read it anyway. J.K. Rowling's an excellent, actually, thinking about it. So J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, obviously, and then wrote as Robert Galbraith. And even when it came out that she was Robert Galbraith, the sales were not Harry Potter level of sales. There was a certain amount of people who read it, and people said, yeah, this is fine for a crime novel. But if she'd have come out with a fantasy series, even something for adults, she probably would have got phenomenal numbers. Anyway, I'm talking around in circles. So the other side of it is disappointing readers, which I think all of us are going to do at some stage. There's two levels of that, I think. There's disappointing readers because you're writing things that they're no longer interested in reading. So, for instance, as I said, if I write Sword and Sorcery, then my sci-fi readers are going to go, what the hell, he's not writing any sci-fi anymore, and be disappointed. Or ending a series, for instance. When I ended Bitter End, people said, oh, why are you ending this? I want to read about these characters forever. So there's that side of things. But there's also the side of things of disappointing readers by doing something to one of their characters that they really love, that they don't particularly want you to do. Like if Dave kills everyone at the end of Seven Stones, for instance. So I think there's two sides to it. I think disappointing people by changing direction, I've been thinking a lot about, and it's kind of what we discussed before, where you have to serve yourself first and be a little selfish when you're an author. Like, you don't want to write a bunch of stuff. I would be perfectly happy writing a bunch of sci-fi, but if I then end up with only 100 readers because I'm writing across a bunch of different things. Is that then satisfying to me as an author that, as you say, like you get to retirement or get to your grave and you only have 100 readers? That's maybe not the most satisfying thing. So then maybe you have to be selfish. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
a
little bit.
Like J.K. Rowling ended Harry Potter. She could have, like, if she had listened to the fans, she would be writing Harry Potter still. It'd be Harry Potter, the 20-year-old, doing something.
I think you need to kill things before they go on too long. Because you look at sort of Stargate, 10 seasons of Stargate. They'd cycled through everything enough. I don't think you could have squeezed another great series of Stargate out of it. So they had the different things like Stargate Universe, Stargate Atlantis, and so on, where they had the same universe but reset with a distinct idea that was different from the Stargate SG-1 franchise. But that towards the end, I think stopping that was a good idea. And the West Wing, where had a lot of seasons of that, came to the end of the Bartlett presidency, and well, you could keep going, but
they limped along.
Itself. So I think with Bitter End, ending it before it trickled on into being sort of yet another Bitter End book that's much the same as the others.
You don't want to become a poor man's Robert Jordan or Terry Goodkind. Those two series got so long that I gave up on both of them. And essentially the two of them were, I don't know who started it first, but the two of them wrote the same savior saga with good and bad magic forms and secret witch cabals, and then one of them turned it into a political thing, and they both went on so long that series that I enjoyed and read straight through. It was just like, really, what else could possibly happen here? You've told me everything, and now you're just selling me books full of the same story over, and it just became uninteresting. And they both did it to me, both the Wheel of Time and whatever the name of the Richard and Kaelin saga ended up being for Goodkind. I mean, you could keep that going on forever, but essentially, if you're going to keep doing it, at least change keep the world and change the story. Don't keep telling me the same story for 20 books about the same character. There's not enough there.
I think the Night Watch, Sergei Lukyanenko's series, it's an easy one to say. So he said there's going to be 3 books and wrote 3 books. And the fans went, oh my God, you have to write more. And he said, no, I'm not going to write anymore because that's what the story was. And then from what I understand, he just came up with such a great idea that he went, well, okay, I have to write a 4th book. And then went, okay, but it's 4 books and that's it. I'm not writing anymore. You've got 4 books. And then he went away and came up with such a good idea that he had to write a 5th book. That's what you want to do. You want to, now there's a 6th one. You want to only write because the idea is so good that you have to go and write it. You don't want to be writing because, well, this sold a lot. So if I write another one, then I can get a house in Spain or something. That's the wrong reason, I think. So yeah, I mean, and I would much rather, as a reader, I would much rather something ends early than drags on. The Stainless Steel Rat series, for instance, I think ended up at about 10. And the last 2 or 3 were not very good. The Myth series, which you can probably see up there, that should have ended at 6 books. They went on for another 10, I think, after that, and just got worse and worse and worse. You want to end, if it's a short novel series, I think 6 to 8 is kind of a good level of a series. You've told plenty of stories in that world at that stage. If it's a long, like, epic fantasy thing, then I think 5 books is probably the limit, or should be.
Well, you don't have to throw away the world, but you at least have to tell me a different story in that world. I mean, you give me 20 books with one character. It's basically, if the character is 30, you've told me, you've given me a book for each year of his adult life. That's just, and it's not an equal apples and oranges. Have them die and tell me the story of their kids at least, or go to a different continent. I mean, that's the difference between, say, the Goodkin Jordan example I gave and a Terry Pratchett. He used the same world, and those were completely different stories, completely different characters on different continents from different points of view. That's okay to me. You're telling me completely different stories. They just happen to inhibit the same reality. But don't tell me, the ongoing saga of 30 books of, Ted the janitor. It's just, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, and with Pratchett as well, he seemed to mix kind of tone and style a bit, even though they're in the same world. Like the Rince, his stuff is kind of silly, whereas the guards kind of stuff is a bit more grounded. Not completely, obviously. It's still a bit silly in places. So yeah, I mean, you can use the same world, but you're still, like, you're mixing up the style a bit or the tone a bit within that world even. And like, there's other goals as well. Like, it's so everyone talks about the Jack Reacher books, the fact that they're all the same book over and over and over. But if that's what the people who read Jack Reacher want to read, that's okay too. I guess.
That's a different kind of fiction.
Yeah.
When we're talking about fantasy, science fiction, and the speculative. That kind of fiction is actually a different animal. That crime fiction, the Reacher stuff, the secret agent stuff, and the romance, those people actually want to read the same book over and over with different names. They go there because of the similarity providing comfort. That's what they like to consume in various forms. It's like someone who only eats chicken has to find 70 different ways to prepare chicken. That's what they want.
I was talking to Dave before the podcast about a book I was reading this week called The Truth Machine. I forget who the author is, but and it's told in a perspective I don't particularly like, which is the godlike, you can hear everyone's thoughts perspective. And so it hops around between characters, and it tells, if you're in a conversation, it says, Julie thought this, but then Jack thought this, but they neither would say it to each other, which is not the style I like. But I kept reading the whole thing because it had an interesting idea behind it. And as a science fiction reader, it occurred to me that it's the idea, a unique idea is what a lot of science fiction readers are looking for, more than seeing, as you say, the Jack Reacher, just the same book over and over and over. Like, if you had Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, and you just told the same story as Star Wars or Star Trek, people would go, well, this is, science fiction fans would go, this is unoriginal, it's just the same thing again. So The Truth Machine was told in a style in a perspective I didn't particularly enjoy, and it jumps around in time, which I don't particularly enjoy, but it gave me an idea I'd never seen before, which was enough for me to read 100,000 words or whatever it was. And just the idea is, just to explain a little, that the world is getting to the stage where at the moment before it was only huge countries that could have atomic weapons or biological weapons, whatever. Now it's gotten to the stage where North Korea or somewhere could have weapons of mass destruction. If you give it another 20 years or 50 years, then anyone can make a nuclear bomb in their basement, because the technology is going to get to that stage where everything's miniaturized and everything's, you know, readily available, and they can.
Lovely.
So the one of the main characters in the book says, well, then there's only one thing for it. We have to have a truth machine, a lie detector that's 100% accurate. So polygraphs are, I forget, 80% accurate or something like that. They're wrong 20% of the time. So he's saying that you need to be able to ask someone, like at an airport, you need to be able to point something at someone and say, are you a terrorist? Are you planning on killing anyone? And no matter what they say, it'll tell you the truth. They say no, it lights up and says red, no, they're a terrorist, they're going to kill you. If they say yes, it lights up green, whatever. Because then you can have these truth machines everywhere. There's kind of, you know, you're getting on a bus or you're getting on a train or you're getting on a plane or whatever. So you can essentially stop mass destruction and terrorist attacks and that kind of thing. So reading that, because he formulated his idea so well, because I couldn't dispute that. Like, we're going to get to the stage where anyone can make a nuclear bomb and destroy a city of 10 million people. That's going to happen in the next 100 years, probably. So I couldn't dispute that. So even though the style wasn't what I enjoy and the perspective, I read the hell out of that book because I was going, that's an amazing idea. So I guess my point being that if you know what your readers are looking for, then you can also avoid disappointing them no matter what you do. Because as long as you keep the core thing that they're looking for, if you're writing sci-fi, the core thing they're looking for is a unique idea. If you're writing fantasy, I guess what would be the core thing there? Good triumphing over evil, or expanding kind of show up. I guess the core thing in fantasy is showing a world that is not this one and showing all of the things that go up to make it where they all still make sense. Would that be what would draw people to fantasy? What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's a change in the past. The science fiction is taking the present and going, well, what if cats can actually teleport or whatever, and just taking it forward on something that's a possible expansion of something that's probably true about the real world and taking that forward. Fantasy, for me, seems to be at some point in the past, between the creation of the universe and now, something changed. And it doesn't have to be real. So it could be the difference is that everyone can throw fireballs because magic is real. But it's a change prior to now.
But yeah, I don't know whether because
I have
if
to
you
go.
Oh, okay, we're just about done anyway, so we can
Okay.
kind of wrap up, I think.
If you wrap up without me, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We can just say goodbye in general, and Dave's last thought can. We'll see you next week, or no,
All right.
2 weeks ahead, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, you can wrap up your last thought before we quit. Dave.
Yeah, I think fantasy also is a more person-based genre. It doesn't have to have a shtick to the world, whereas science fiction has to have a certain science-ness to it. So you couldn't have science fiction that was a book about people 10 years in the future having a romance without there being something to make it science fiction. Whereas you could have two orcs having a romance, and that would be fantasy, even if there wasn't much else.
I don't know. I think there has to be. I think fantasy, similar to sci-fi, has to explore the difference. In that, so the Xanth series might be a good example, where Xanth is Xanth, to explain to people who haven't read it. Everyone who's born in the magical country of Xanth has a talent, and some people's talents are like very mundane kind of things, like they can they have their shoelaces never come untied or something like that. And some people have magical talents which are at a level where they're called magicians, where their talent could be applied to almost universal situations. So Dor, for instance, one of the main characters, he can get inanimate objects to talk and tell him stuff. So if he's investigating a murder, he can ask the floor who did the murder, and then he finds out who the murderer was. So that's a very interesting concept, because it's a unique take on a magical system. But the stories all follow the same formula, where someone feels out of place, they go on a quest, they are going on the quest with someone else who feels out of place. The two people fall in love and realize that their places with each other, and then they get back to the world. And it's the same one over and over and over and over and over. So I read 10, 12 books in that series and went, okay, this is done. Because I think if you've got, even in fantasy you can certainly retread the same steps to a certain extent, but I think there has to be something distinct about it. Otherwise you could read historical romance or historical books and get the same thing. Anyway, I don't think we're going to crack the secrets of fantasy right here, so we should probably wrap up. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next week.